All right, so I'm here with Paul Mosher. And Paul, you're a farmer. You've been an engineer. You've been a truck driver. You've done an awful lot of things right outside the farm equipment capital of the world is what it was known for.
Yep. Good old Geneseo, Illinois, and within 20 miles of
The Quad Cities.
Where Case IH was, and or Case and IH and John Deere, and still a lot there. So.
If I remember right, at one time I heard there was, of course, IH and Deere. Case, J.I. Case had some stuff here. Alice Chalmers had stuff, I thought.
Probably, if there was, it was on I'm not familiar with it, but it would be on the Davenport side or Iowa side, the river, I should say. So.
And then
Case used to build crawlers on the Iowa side, right, and Bettendorf there too. And
yep. So. And didn't, and I'm assuming Minneapolis Moline had some connection, didn't it?
Could be, yeah.
So, but at one time they considered the Quad Cities the farm equipment capital of the world. So.
Yep, and of course we know what happened with a lot of that stuff and buyouts and whatever, or
right.
bankruptcies, and that Case went through, or IH went through, and et cetera. So.
Yeah. So before you became an engineer, though, you were a farmer and a farm kid.
I was a farm kid. My dad was an IH dealer in what was Provincetown, Illinois. I had the 3-digit phone numbers at that time frame. 250 was the call number, I guess I should say. And he was back, I don't know what year he actually started selling, but he ended up, him and a partner of his who farmed in the area also. My dad sold out in '61, I believe it was, and to Benners and Loss in Provincetown at that time frame. And we had a farm there on 160 acres there in Provincetown. And my dad wasn't totally IH or whatever, but I mean, we had a few John Deeres too growing up, 2 cylinders, diesels and what. Actually, I was about 2.5 years old when I happened one summer, and we had a big yard where I crawled out onto this 730, and Dad always left it in gear with it shut off. And it was a diesel, 730 diesel, so it was direct start.
Yep.
And I happened to be hitting some switches, and this is a little off from my age, but I hit the starter button on it anyway, and he'd left it in gear, like maybe it was in second or third gear, I don't know. But the steering wheel must have been turned just right, because I was going around in circles. And my dad wasn't home. He went to town to get something, I guess. My mom freaked out, and she ended up having to call the neighbor. So that was my first experience of driving a tractor, I guess, if you call it driving a tractor. I was riding, I guess, so.
Yeah.
But you know how those 730 diesels, or the diesels, had a lot of torque to them. Whatever, and start. So
yeah,
anyway.
that torque was kind of part of their downfall.
Yeah.
Guys would shut them off and not pull the decompression lever, and that torque would ratchet the flywheel pretty hard.
It had that fuel stop, for your throttle, and once that clicked forward, it was ready to go. So anyway, let's get back to the IH stuff anyway, or this tractor anyway, because he drove it home from Rock Island where they were built.
So he drove it.
Some of the other tractors he would haul too, or whatever else. But I know he drove this one because they had you went underneath the railroad tracks there and whatever, and that's where they loaded out tractors and stuff there, I guess. So anyway, he got this one, which is a kind of a unique one. It's stage 2, 54 model.
Yep.
And it has power steering on it. Had the Charlene at one time frame, and then I've changed it over to where I put a priority valve off of the hydraulic pump now go to the power steering, because they used to have the hole in the hood for the Charlene, the tank.
Yep.
So I got rid of that. But the main thing it had is a 9-speed transmission. Had that
the M&W.
Yep. And it's got the belt pulley to it too, because we use that for hammer mill and stuff like that. But I spent a lot with the loader on it. It's got a 33A loader that goes with it, and with a trip bucket. And that we, tons of manure that was hauled with it and scraped up yards and whatever with the cattle and the hog operation. And I used to, old time farming, you used to harrow the corn and whatever after the planter, and then rotary hoe. So I spent a lot of time first overdrive with this thing, or even raking hay. So she had a lot of hours, hauled in ear corn with it with a barge box, and we really, good old times, I guess I should say. We had an inside elevator at that time frame, where you would run your wagon up below it, flip your door up, and then back it up to it, and then raise up your hoist with a barge wagon and fill up the corn crib. And then,
Was that a Morton inside elevator? If you had?
I don't know. It had drag change to it, and it had the cup elevator. I don't think it was a Morton. It was a different. I think that crib was probably built in early 50s, I believe. So,
okay.
So I think it was a newer type elevator anyway. So, but it worked good. So
I'm assuming your dad was an M&W dealer then too?
I presume so. I never really asked him about it too much, but
I never understood why IH didn't put the 9-speed on or buy the patent to it, because if there's one downfall to a H or M or a 400, 450 through a 560 is there's not enough gears.
Yep. And you just think about how many H's and M's are out there that were sold all over the country.
Well, that made the two men M&W a ton of money. I forget what their names were, but they.
Yeah, the guy's down there at the show in Illinois every 2 years or whatever. That he knows a lot of information. I'd like to go meet him sometime. I've never had to do that. So,
but there were so many attachments. I forget how many total attachments you could put on one, but it was.
Yeah, it's probably less than 20, I think, or somewhere around there. M&W governor, the carburetor. I think they did some
air cleaner.
Air cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that 9-speed, I had a Farmall M with a 9-speed, and raking hay with an M or an H or any M, 450, whatever. Fourth gear was just a little bit slow, and fifth gear with the torque back was way too fast. Yep. So you'd put it in high, and then second gear, and wow, that was perfect.
That's why. Yeah, harrowing corn or rotary hoeing corn, I guess. It's just the right speed, and these were actually pretty economical on gas and whatever too. But in the winter time, you'd put a heat houser on it, and even though we had the loader, and you'd be out there in the yard scraping up stuff, and good old days. So, good old tractor. That's why I've kind of kept it around, because that's what I grew up with, and love this little, easy to get on and off, Especially when you're hauling in corn, you'd hook up your drawbar, and it was, even though we had like a 720 diesel too, and backing up a wagon, you're trying to push the hand clutch in, you're trying to look and whatever, or you kick the PTO on. It always kicked you in the shin or whatever when you went to kick it off, and that it was just. Deere had some nice power steering and stuff like that, and some other unique feet. Hydraulics were good, and the steering was good, but just M or whatever to move around stuff or back up, it was a lot easier with
a friend of mine.
Red one.
A friend of mine wanted to do a poll for what's the best tractor to teach a kid how to drive a tractor on. He asked me, and I said, well, I'm going to give him a hay rack and a 720 diesel and tell him to go back it in a shed. And he says, well, why would you do that? And I go, well, if they really like driving tractor and they can do that, they're going to be really good at it.
They're going to be damn good. Yeah. And have a sore neck at the end of the day, probably.
Yep.
They're good tractors. So.
I always love the 2-cylinder promotion was they suggested how easy it was to back up to farm equipment. And what they mean by that is you get it close while you're sitting on the seat, but then to finish hooking it up, you jump down off the seat and reach up and push the clutch lever ahead. And I thought,
Dangerous.
could you imagine the underwriters at the Deere that we have today?
Yep.
They wouldn't even know what to say.
Yep. You're gonna kill yourself. Well, there's things we did back then with these things too, you know.
Yeah.
You could jump off and run alongside it or something if you want it. Throw a couple hay bales on a hay rack and jump back
Yep.
on it and go.
So, do you remember the IH dealership?
I do. I remember going in and
What year were you born?
I was born in '57.
Okay.
So, yep. So like I said, I was like about 2.5 years old or so when I ended up with that 730 driving it around a little bit.
So was that a new 730 then at the time? It would have been. Yeah.
And I got the operator's manual from that yet too, or whatever. But I don't know if I got the serial number of it. But yeah, it was new. And my dad, I don't know, he knew the Deere dealer pretty well or whatever since they kind of worked together. But so that's why I guess we had some newer Deere there. I mean, I remember we had a 450 too with a high throw crank in it, which turned out about 70 horse. And Dad always plowed with that. He had a 414's number 16 pull plow or whatever. We had some gumbo up on that one farm.
Was that a like 450 gas?
Yep. 450
Okay.
gas with a high throw crank in it and stuff.
The Deere diesel at the time was probably a little bit better than the start on gas switch to diesel.
Yep.
Especially when they came out with the 24 volt starting versus the pony start.
Exactly. Yep.
Yep. So
And we had one of those too. We had the pony start diesel too or whatever. And that actually had a little bit more power than the direct start one because we had two of them at one time. Dad did. And
both Roll-O-Matics?
Yep. Both Roll-O-Matics.
Fenders?
Nope. No fenders.
Okay.
No fenders. Yeah. And those were good. That was a little bit later. Didn't happen until we moved to a different farm or 240 acre farm at that time frame for the two cylinders. The 720s anyway. The 730 he didn't keep very long.
Okay.
He got rid of that.
So when he quit selling IH then, did you continue to buy both colors to farm with?
Yeah, pretty much. And to get back to that, you asked about the dealership, which was on the main street in Provincetown, Illinois, which is a Subway dealer or a Subway sandwich shop right now. In the back side of it's a plumber unit, and that was the mechanic shop or whatever.
Yep.
And then across the street, that was our parking lot for new equipment and then stuff like that. So, and then he sold dozers and refrigerators and freezers, and we had a refrigerator and a freezer, which lasted a long time before we decided to shuck out all that weight out of the house from moving to different locations. So, he pretty much about after that 730, you know, he had that 450. He'd bought that new too or whatever, and then had that crank put in it there at the dealership, and it was just a small store back, you know, IHs were back then, but he used to tell me too about when they had to go out and repossess equipment or whatever from farmers that couldn't pay anymore. The one story I really liked was where one of the dozers, the guy said, "Well, if you can find it, you can take it." And they went out and searched his property, and they found some fresh dirt. Well, they ended up getting a shovel and digging down, and the farmer had buried this dozer down in the dirt. And he covered up the exhaust and stuff like that. So they had to, you know, unearth the old girl and get her back to where they could repossess it at that time frame. So I can always remember that story he told me and stuff. And anyway. But once we moved to another farm, we got a 1206 at that time frame. And,
so was it a new 1206?
Nope, it was 2 years old, I think. It was a 66 model.
Okay.
And a guy had traded, it was up Polo Equipment was where we got that one. That
Yep.
was, so it was a 66 model, serial number 8920. I can remember it very well. And it had the ice cream cab, which
Yep.
got tore off of it right away when they put fenders on it. And we ended up putting a 540,000 PTO in it too.
Yep.
I think it was running 130 PTO horse, but it was a good old tractor. We used a 6-bottom plow on that.
So that would have been the gold emblems on that one of 66, right?
Yep.
Because 65 would have been the white.
And it had instead of having the white 1206, it had the emblem that had
the gold
in it and
emblem.
stuff like that.
Yep. So that would have been, you're saying around 1968?
Probably around 68 then.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a big tractor then.
It was, yeah. And one reason he bought it was because we had a Paypec chopper.
Okay.
Or he got a Paypec chopper 2-row.
Like a
So
flywheel
we were doing
one?
some custom chopping.
Okay.
No screen in it, but it had the 6-knife cutter bar, or maybe it did have a screen in it. I'm not sure for sure. But I remember we had that for quite a while. And
Did you get self-unloading chopper boxes, or did you have to?
We had, well, the other guy that was in business with him at the dealership, he'd sold out his part of the dealership too, and then they both kind of farmed together, helped each other out, had livestock and whatever. And he had some chopper boxes, and we had a Deere chopper box at that time frame. So
PTO powered.
Always filled off to the side. We never pulled behind.
Really?
Except for opening up the field. You know, we had a 2MH corn picker that Dad would open up the cornfields with.
Yep.
To chop and whatever. So, and that always went on the 450, the 2MH corn picker. So.
And it'd feed the wet corn right away to the steers, or?
Yep.
Okay.
Or grind it up. We had a needler grinder and whatever. We'd have a little elevator, and it'd be, just whatever the cattle could eat for a couple days or whatever.
Yep.
Because you didn't want it to set up and get too hot.
Yep.
We didn't pick a lot at that time frame. I mean, until it was time to actually fill the corn crib.
So at 68 then, how many acres he had bought the bigger farm? And
that was a 240-acre farm there. Yeah, we sold the 160-acre farm to a guy that was up on a county line, or Washington Street in Provincetown, basically, and then moved on a 92 farm, which was where we had. It was a hilltop farm basically, but it had 2 big, nice barns to it, nice cattle setup, and then we farrowed hogs down in a building too, and that.
So then all your grain was fed on the farm.
Pretty much fed. Yep, all it was fed. We didn't. The only he had a combine, a 101 combine, if people remember them, without a cab, that him and his brother shared. And one would get done with oats, and the other one would take and do his oats. But we never ever shelled corn, but my uncle did shell corn with it.
Okay.
And they kind of used that back and forth for a while, and then the next combine after that was a 315 IH, which basically had sides that would open up on it to get into the middle, which grain tanks were on the side.
Okay.
Basically. And it had a cab on it, but we didn't use that mainly for oats and whatever, and a little bit of corn at that time frame.
So then feeding the cattle and picking corn to dry, since you're.
Yep.
Did you guys ever start doing high moisture corn?
Nope.
Okay.
Not really, no. We had a bin there that probably only held 3,000 bushel of shelled corn, and Dad would fill that, and that was about it. Unless we shelled out of the crib and we needed some shelled corn and whatever, but and then the shelled corn was usually used for the hogs, if anything. We'd run it through a hammer mill, had a John Deere hammer mill, I remember that, and hook up the belt pulley, the belts, and listen to that thing hum.
So, yeah, then with farrow to finish on the hogs, were you just buying feeder cattle for the feedlot, or was that cow calf?
We had some cow calves. That was one thing. I think we had around 30 cows, Hereford cows.
Okay.
Basically, me and my sisters had 13 cows ourselves. And what we did, or Dad gave us the calves off those cows, and that was money put into the bank to save for our college at that time frame.
Okay.
So it was a way we could spend money when we turned 18, I guess. So.
Okay.
Yep.
So then, so you guys are just feeding cattle and cow calf and farrowing hogs, and
Yep.
then you would have graduated in what, 75 from high school?
75 was when I graduated, and at that time I decided I loved tractors, and I always loved tearing apart stuff and working on it, even when I was a kid. I'd tear apart Briggs and Stratton engines and put them back together when I was like 6, 7 years old.
Yep.
And so I got it, and I always thought it'd be good to take mechanics, whatever. And when I graduated high school, I went to Spoon River College in Canton, Illinois.
Okay.
And there is a 2.5-year college for diesel mechanics, and excellent instructors, excellent school. A lot of people around this area have gone there that turned out to be great mechanics. And there's 4 of us from Geneseo that went. And then once I got out of there, excuse me, was the year I left down there. Dad and I started farming together or whatever, and that's when I bought a brand new 4230.
So you never went and worked as a mechanic then at that
Just
time?
When I was going to college, I worked at a dealership down there, helping them out.
Okay.
I hadn't graduated or anything at that time frame. Actually, it was when I remember the 1086s came out, 1977 or 76.
Yep.
And we had one in the paint booth or whatever. It had to be undercover until they actually released them. And then we still had a lot of the black stripe tractors around the dealership then at that time frame.
So you were working at an IH dealer that...
Yeah, just after school classes
Okay.
and whatever, maybe, and then on Saturdays and stuff like that. And then when I came back home, then I had my own shop that I did minor stuff, and then after a while, my buddy that built another repair shop, I helped him out quite a bit, independent repair shop. So, and I did a lot of overhauls there, helping him out, and whatever needed to be done. Torques, clutches, etc., transmissions, power shifts, all that stuff. We got
A lot of stuff in the winter time because you're...
it could be in the summertime too. It could be after hours with farming and stuff. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Whenever if he ran into a bind where he needed some extra help or whatever, there was a couple years there where I went in driving semi for a couple years too, with the farming,
helping
when
out.
I started out.
Well, yeah, let's go back to 75. So you're gonna start farming.
Yep. Well, 77.
Okay, or after. Okay, so 77.
Because that's when I bought the 4230 brand new from Bellinger Farm Equipment in Geneseo, which my dad helped or co-signed the loan for me to get it, which was $18,000 cash. It was a quad range 4230 with a cab.
Sound guard. And
had one hydraulic cylinder that came with it, and a set of rear wheel weights that came on it too, and quad range.
Yep.
And I thought I was in seventh heaven when I had that thing. You go out and plow at night, have a bag of Doritos in your cab, and maybe a Mountain Dew sitting there and whatever, and the sound guard cabs were just awesome at that time frame.
Yeah. So was that your first real cab? You had the 1206 had a cab, but it was the ice cream box, so it wasn't.
Well, I got tore off.
Yeah.
So I never really utilized that. And we still had 1206 too. That was our main tractor at that time yet. But
it'd go to a sound guard after having. I tell young guys all the time that complain about a sound guard, you never did field work without a cab if you're complaining about that cab.
Yeah. Oh, the heater and the air conditioning. I mean, I hauled manure with it in the winter, and it just, it's just like you were comfortable at the end of the day. You weren't tired or anything like that. And then a few years later after that, my dad had bought a 1086 in '79, which I think that was full. Well, to roll back just a little bit, because we had a uni system there at one time.
Yep.
And 708 with a power rear assist and whatever, and he had the combine attachment and a corn picker attachment and
the chopper
too. And
okay.
that was always an issue, because we always raised like 100 acres of oats, and you know, you want to chop corn or chop hay, I mean, or combine oats. So, and it takes a good day just to switch stuff over.
Yep.
And so we ended up getting rid of that, and he ended up trading that for the 1086, a 830 IH chopper, and then we got a 600 blower then too. We upgraded from a old Fox blower.
You got a 600 to skip the 56, huh?
That was a good blower.
And she'd make the 1206 work, I bet, a little bit, huh?
Not too bad.
But you could blow pretty hard with it.
Blow pretty good. I think I used my 4020s on the blower then, or whatever. So, and hauled in with like the 450. I had a couple Deere boxes, John Deere boxes, and
not 714s or 716s.
No, they were the 112s, 15s. You know.
Okay.
At that time frame, with cover on them and stuff. So and
what did you think of the 1086 after having the sound guard?
It was all right.
Was it cheaper than buying, say, a 4430 at the time? Or no, that would have been 4440.
4440 at that time.
Yeah.
I think probably why he ended up pricing white, I guess the white 2105s and stuff like that.
2135 maybe?
Or 135.
Yeah.
And at the time, but my cousins actually owned the IH dealership. He started them with the IH dealership in Geneseo at that time, called Empire Equipment. So there's two of my cousins that started up the IH dealership in Geneseo at that time frame, and they built a new building and whatever, and they ended up matching the same price as what the white dealer did. And
okay.
I think that would have been a Gale chopper and stuff, but he got rid of that, so we got a 4400 gas combine at that time frame.
Okay.
And we had a self-propelled windrower, 800 John Deere windrower, as well as a 990 IH motor conditioner.
Yep.
And the John Deere windrower had a draper head.
Yep.
And then it had a removable
conditioner. Yeah.
But they were like fluted rolls.
Yep.
And which was a decent windrower and stuff, but we used that for oats, windrow the oats. And I did a lot of custom. A lot of guys had oats that would go down, and then I would have to go. They'd want me to come windrow their oats.
Yep.
Because they could pick them up with a platform, but we ended up having a John Deere belt pickup. So.
Yeah.
And so that worked out great for the only problem with a 4400 gas was they sucked air through the front and then blew it out the side because they didn't have the rotary air screen at that time.
It was you had a flat screen one.
Yep. And then, so we ended up getting a 4400 diesel a couple of years later, and it had the rotary air screen.
Probably a lot, more power and
Definitely
better
more
fuel.
Power, better fuel economy.
Yep.
And we had some, this was when we moved to a different farm to the south of Geneseo. And so we had some hills and clay hills and stuff a little bit. So, it could handle the hills a lot better. And
you'd run a gear faster probably with the diesel than you could the gas.
Yeah, usually second gear still.
Yep.
But I mean, with the propulsion drive and whatever.
Yep.
It just
variable speed.
It just had more power.
Yep.
And that, and they were good combines and whatever. But so, yeah, it was good, worked out good. And then that 1086 was. Actually, I was out disking some plowed ground one spring or whatever, and ended up having my appendix happened to burst from that night or whatever, and it caused probably from bouncing around in the cab on a 1086 because it doesn't ride as smooth as a sound guard would, So
yeah.
But and then eventually, I bought all that with my dad, I bought a lot of his equipment or whatever and started farming on my own. And
So did he retire at that point?
Somewhat. Now, that's another story in itself, because he ended up, we sold the one farm up on 92. That was on a 10-year contract.
Yep.
And come the 10th year, well, he bought this other farm, which was 640 acres. And 240 of it was pasture, which he ended up selling 240 of the pasture off after a couple of years, because we still had stock cows. We had like 100 stock cows at that time frame, and calves, excuse me. And anyway, during that, selling that farm on contract the 10th year, and the economy was farm economy was going through a sour phase. And that 10th year, the guy couldn't pay for it, so he got that farm back. So my dad went back up to that farm, moved back up there, and I took over the other farm, and then I helped farm that, and then helped him farm that, I guess I should say. I'd just take my tractors up there, and I had a 4450 with a front assist, and that was with a 15-speed power shift, and
yep.
That was a nice tractor. And,
but so, and getting back to 77 and stuff like that, you get out of college there, and boy, farming looked pretty good in 77, didn't it?
It wasn't too bad. Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
Except I was on kind of salary with Dad. I wasn't 50-50 at the time. Yeah.
Okay. So then you start like that 4230. What was your interest rate on that? Probably 12, 13. Because it hadn't gotten too crazy.
No, it wasn't too bad. And the only problem was I only kept it 3 years, and then I sold it. I mean, I got the same amount of it that I paid for it, basically. Yep. And then I bought a 4020 with an M&W turbo.
Okay.
That 72 model.
Yep.
At that time frame. And
but you're starting all this and this journey right before the farm crisis.
Yep.
So.
And I've been through the farm crisis where we borrowed money for cattle. I never had to pay for inputs, luckily. I always was pretty good at that. But I'd borrow money to buy feeder cattle or whatever. And I had, 1 year I had to pay 21% interest for the cattle. Never made any money on them.
No.
But I survived, and still was able to buy. I didn't always go out and buy new equipment, but it was used or whatever, or slightly used.
Yep.
If I did need like a tractor or whatever, like the 4450.
Yep.
I ended up trading a 1086 on that, and then.
What year would you got that 4450?
It was used, and it probably was 85. It had 200 hours on it.
Okay.
And it was just like brand new. The guy that I bought it from was from Atkinson or whatever, and he always took good care of the equipment, but he'd kind of quit farming, so it never had a heck of a lot of hours on it.
And tractors got cheap at that time.
Yeah, I think it was, if I remember right, it was around 36 or 8,000 was what I had to pay for it, I believe.
Okay.
And it had 38 tires to it, and it was a good tractor. My wife loves running Deere tractors. They were creature comfort.
Yeah.
Type equipment, compared to the 1086 and whatever.
Yep.
And at that time frame too, I'd bought a 2+2, which was a cheap 4-wheel drive horsepower, and used that for the heavy tillage and whatever at that time frame. So.
The 44, would that have been triple remotes then if it was power shift, front wheel assist?
Yep.
So she was pretty loaded.
It was very well equipped,
full digital dash.
Yep.
With the Investigator too, and
yep.
Okay.
Had the cream colored interior and stuff.
Yep.
At that time frame, a hydraulic seat. And
What'd you think of getting front wheel assist after? Was that your first front wheel assist?
First front wheel assist I had, because you'd go through the field and you'd turn it on, turn it off. You could tell a difference.
Oh yeah.
But when I got the 2+2, you could really tell a difference versus a front assist.
Right.
It had 4 equal size wheels pulling all the time. So.
And that 2+2 was at 3588.
Yeah, 3388.
33. Okay.
And it was around 170 horse PTO horse on that
Yep.
one out of the factory. So. So
And that was a good tractor too, because some people that
I liked it, you know. I mean, I can't complain. It had the big fuel tanks, you know, extra
Yep.
fuel tank and whatever. I even had an older guy that helped me with tillage work and stuff, and he loved running that tractor too. It's just, you had to get used to that nose turning on you.
Yep.
You come up to a fence line, you know, you got to
Yep.
turn before you get that close. So
Well, that was IH's front wheel assist, is what it was, because they didn't have a front wheel assist. They had Elwood or Coleman, but they didn't turn very good. Where the 2+2 would turn.
Yep. And my uncle was part of that Elwood development.
Really?
Yep. He was actually on 92 farm. His name was Don Stanky, and he was one of the guys that helped develop that for the 806. They started out
Okay.
on an 806. So there's a little history there anyway.
So then you're getting through the 80s. You're doing all right. I mean,
Yep.
what did the cattle? You keep the cattle the whole time,
Yep.
and the hogs still farrow and hogs.
Farrow and hogs, I did both out in the field as well as in the barn. I had I think I had 12 crates set up in there where I could
Yep.
farrow more when the weather wasn't quite as good in the winter time, or farrow in March sometimes a little bit early before I moved out to the field and that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, we had Chicago Atkinson Livestock Market you could sell cattle there or buy cattle there, but hogs was a big deal there because Henry County was hog capital of the world, so a lot of hogs came in through there, and
Yep.
there was always at least 5 or 6 buyers buying your hogs that
okay.
you went in there.
So then, when did you decide to quit full-time farming?
Well, that's started in kind of 94. I wanted to end up buying some ground and whatever because Dad retained ownership of the other.
So you didn't own any land of your own yet?
At that time frame. And
Okay.
I always wanted to buy farm ground. And there was another farm probably 4 miles away that had 3 harvesters on it and whatever. And I was within $50 an acre of buying that farm. And that's when if you show me that Prairie Farmer
Yep.
article that I put out, that I put a plea out there to see, you know, with young farmers trying to buy farm ground and how difficult it was. But that extra $50 an acre, I thought, I just couldn't, it wouldn't pan out, which is nowadays.
Yeah, right.
Look back, well, that was nothing. Pay $2,400 an acre, nothing. You know?
Yep.
But, that year, everything, I had rented a farm that year, cash rent.
Yep.
Dad said he cash rented because we were always in conflict. He always liked the moldboard plow, you know, with the clay hills and stuff, or even the good ground. It wasn't a problem with good ground, but the clay hills, you know, it was like gumbo almost.
Yep.
Sometimes you had that hard slabs come up, you'd have clumps and whatever. You'd go out there and run over it with a cola mulcher and the disc and whatever and try and knock it down for planting. And but I ended up cash renting that year, and he gave me a decent price to rent it and by the acre. And everything looked beautiful that year. Everything worked out great. And the guy I was telling you about that kind of helped me out, he was in his 80s too, about like my dad was. And we were all 3 there one day, and we were looking at bottom fields where it was 100 acres down there. And the older guy, his name was Lyle. And Lyle said to my dad, he says, "You should be proud of the way the crops look this year," or whatever else. And my dad's comment was, "That just proves that on a good year anybody could farm," and that just upset me.
Oh.
So I thought, that's it. My dad was very difficult to work for. I'll admit that, or whatever. He was good guy and everything. I loved him and stuff, but he was always critical and chewing me out on stuff and whatever. And I just said, that's enough. I'm going to go do something else. So that's when I quit farming, was in '94.
So
Fall. And then I kept the equipment for a couple of years. Some of it I sold pieces off before because I knew I wouldn't use them anymore. And then a couple of years later, and I just kept a couple tractors. I kept this one, which, you know, he bought new, and then a 450. I kept two for a while, and then I ended up selling that eventually. So.
Well, you just, boy, in '94, you just missed the $5 corn.
And that's one reason why I didn't buy that farm. I thought corn's always going to be $2 a bushel. It'll never go above $2 a bushel, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
And it finally did, and now it's getting back toward it. It's $4 a bushel, and you can't,
Right.
you know, and your inputs are damn high anymore that guys, you know, barely break even. So.
When you said you were gonna quit, then was your dad kind of shocked then that if you had been renting the ground?
No, he was wishing I always came back, I guess. Even on his deathbed, he lived to 95 and a half, and I was there the day he died. And that morning he goes to me, I wish you'd come back and farm that farm. That was my dream, you know. And I said, well, it's been rented out. You know, you got it rented out to other people, and you know, there's no way I'm going to farm it now. So,
yeah.
And which was unfortunate. I mean, that was his dying wish, I guess, in a way. But I ended up buying, you know, 160 acres of that farm, so at least I still have that memory and value of that. And you know, you got to buy dirt, basically. They don't make new dirt.
How much older was he? Was he older when you were born?
My dad's 40 years older than me.
Okay.
So.
And, you know, I was just talking about this with some young people, and I said, farm ownership, because there's a lot of debating people about, like, if you look at the dairy industry, they brought in immigrant labor to replace, basically you have big dairies, and they run on immigrant labor, and the big dairies kind of pushed out the small dairies, and yep. I said, no one could outwork a guy that owned his own cows and did it, because he will work cheaper yep. than any immigrant, any person in the world. He'll work because he's working for ownership. Yep. And that's why I said that's why you got to give these guys a shot to own their farm. Otherwise, you're not getting anywhere.
Right. Yep.
Equity in equipment is fleeting. That, you know.
And that's the same way as the housing industry now too. A lot of people are renting versus buying
right.
a house. Well, at the end of your 20 years, you don't have any equity if you've been renting all those years. At least if you're paying on a house, you're building some equity there. So,
right.
So it's just the way the world is going, unfortunately.
So then, '94, what do you do then when you quit farming?
I went back to school, college or whatever. I decided I always liked electrical. Electrical was always a challenge, no matter what. And so I went to go do my electrical engineering degree. And what I ended up doing was, for those 2 years, or 2.5 years, it was school at night. Was what it ended up being in Iowa. And I would work during the day, wrenching helping my buddy out. I was
yep.
Doing tractor engine overhauls, etc. Studying at my toolbox for the test that I had that night or whatever, of going after my electrical engineering degree. And we never had any breaks. It was solid through 4 nights a week. So you had Friday and Saturday and Sunday off. But you only had 3 days at Christmas time, and just Good Friday, or Easter, I should say.
Yep.
And that was it. You just kept going. It was
through the weekend and there.
The weekend
you did.
You could do whatever you wanted.
Okay.
You had to usually write your papers or study or whatever. Yep. But that was the best thing I ever did, was go back and get an electrical engineering degree at that time frame, bachelor's, I should say.
Were you able to use some of the credits from your?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I had to take. They wanted me to do an English class again, which I thought was stupid, but to meet the requirements, I did it anyway. And but that was there wasn't any credits that were able to transfer over or anything like that at that time frame. So, and
So
I
you-
paid for it all myself. I mean, it wasn't, I had to go borrow money to do it or anything, so, the classes, so.
But still, at almost 40 years old, to basically start over.
I was 37, I think,
Yeah.
at that time frame, so.
Yep.
And, yeah, start over, in a way.
When you did that magazine article,
Yep.
did it upset your dad?
No,
That-
I,
He didn't say, "Well, you have a
not
farm."
really. I kind of expected some negativity from it, but no, Mom and was real good with it and stuff like that. And I mean, I had a couple offers out. I had a university professor out of Iowa State that he didn't have any kids or anything like that, and wanted to know if I'd take over the farm. And I actually went out and visited with him, but we never decided to, take the move out there at that time frame, because we had my 3 young children, were in school here and whatever, and I didn't want to really uproot them at that time frame. So,
Okay.
but it worked out great, because and later, like after doing my electrical engineering degree, I was still farming basically, because when I went to work for Case IH and Deere and Company, I was out there in the fields farming.
Right.
Running combines and stuff I was in combine with the engineering and stuff like that, building prototypes and so I was still actively engaged with farmers and actually farming or harvesting crops year round.
Yep.
I mean, there was always something going on, and it wasn't just here in the United States. I mean, I got to go over in Germany and Scotland and England and Australia. I mean, you got to learn how the world farmed at that time frame. It was a great experience.
Yep.
Loved it. So,
Yeah, it's funny how God will kind of put you where you need to be.
Exactly. Yep. And that's what. And when you read that article that I did in Prairie Farmer, it talks about God and how He's changed my life and whatever over the years and stuff. And my wife, had a lot to do with it. Been married now 40, going on 47, 48 years now.
Okay.
And, so, I mean, I met her long back. We got married in '78.
Okay.
And that was another rift too, because my dad had, on the one farm, he built a brand new house, a 6-bedroom house, basically, 2-story. And the old house, which was at the edge of his driveway, or concrete, was where we lived. So, boy, you talk about
Too close.
a little too close to the
Yeah.
parents. Well, they'd say when you got outside in the morning or whatever to do chores or whatever, well, how come you weren't out there early, doing, and stuff like that. So, or who was over at your house visiting, and that, or I'd go over and have coffee with Mom and Dad, or in the 9 o'clock break in the morning or something like that. And my wife didn't like that because she wanted me to spend time with her too. So,
So did you move off the farm then when you quit?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
So when Dad ended up moving back to the '92 farm, and when he got that back, I moved into the newer house, and then the old one got tore down because it was built back in the early 1800s.
Okay.
I mean, we had a wood stove in the kitchen that we kind of helped heat the house, as well as an oil burner, but those old houses were like a draft central,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And the new house was nice. It was built in '78 when he built that house. So, so that worked out in a way. So, but I ended up moving off the farm. Then I kept the farm equipment out there in the machine shed because he rented out the ground to other people.
Yep.
So that worked out where I stored stuff for a couple years before I even ended up having a farm sale, selling all my equipment or whatever I wanted to keep, I still kept. Excuse me. And we moved off, so I was closer to the cities and school, as well as I was probably 7 miles from like Deere headquarters. Where
Okay.
I ended up at. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we almost need to make it a part 2, just talking about the engineering and the, because you get out of you get your degree
Yep.
Is that the first place you went to go work was for Case IH?
Yeah, well, I was working, like I said, at that independent repair shop, and when the one guy that actually was a developer of the first axial flow combine,
Yep.
Dave is his first name. Anyway, I don't know that I should use his last name at this time frame, but he was the one that wanted me to put in my application to go to Case IH, which was in East Moline at that time frame.
Right.
And you know, it was 54 acres under roof with the combines, and that's he kind of encouraged me, and my wife said, you know, I should go for it and whatever, and that's what I did, and that was great experience to go through when I did that. So yeah, so that's another story in itself.
Yeah.
And then going to John Deere after
Which it
working at
wasn't.
Case 8 years, and
Which is interesting because there's a lot of red versus green people, but there's a lot of farmers that like both.
yeah,
But you get some of the diehards, and they're like, they would have rather went to work for any other company in the world than to go to the other competition.
exactly. Yeah,
And
a lot of rivalry, and
Yeah.
and still, I don't want to say it's still there. Now it's more who's going to be able to service me, the dealer.
right.
You know,
And-
unless you want to look at, you know, what's the value of equipment if you want to trade it or whatever else.
Yep.
I mean, Deere still has a higher resale versus IH in a way, but if you want to buy something anymore, they're fairly equal with all the computer-driven stuff,
Yep.
which is good and bad. But you know, it's just farming's different.
And you got 168. So we'll do a whole separate video on the engineering
That's
here
fine.
coming up one of these days. But so you got 160 acres of farm ground.
There at the other place. This place here is just that we're filming at is just a little hobby farm that I'm planning on building a house at here.
Okay.
Someday.
You got a little tillable ground here?
Just a little bit. It's in wheat right now
Okay.
and stuff, and we have some lavender out here too that's planted that my wife loves lavender, and we'll maybe make a business out of that someday or whatever, selling that. But it's a good place for the grandkids to grow up.
Yep.
And stuff, and the other is just all tillable, pretty much the farm.
Do you farm that?
No, I rent that out too.
Okay.
And that's to a younger farmer. I've always wanted to have younger people get
Pay it
into the
forward.
trade and whatever, and he's probably 40 years old now, but and he bought some of the home farm there too, so that worked out for him also, and then still let him farm the ground that was original part of
Okay.
it. So yeah, it worked out great.
So no burning desire to get a combine and a planter again yourself, and
Don't have to. I can.
Yeah.
I got people around here that want me to come help them or whatever.
right.
And that. So and I have. I've run the 12-row combine, or 12 rows on the Deere 780s and stuff like
Yep.
that. And driving semi, I've got all kinds of guys that want me to drive semi, and it's just yeah. There's no ending to finding work if I want it.
Right. And that's one thing I kind of missed there. When you went to work for driving truck for CRST,
Yep. Back in the 80s. Yep.
Cedar Rapids Steel Transport, were you over the road?
Yep. Company driver. There was 2 years in there when I did that, because me and my dad, I was working, hourly or whatever, and the wife, we weren't making a lot of money at the time frame, and me and my dad got into a little argument, and that's when I went off trucking then for a while, and which after that, after my son was born, that was my first child, was born in '83, and 1983 he was born, and I said, no, I'm not going to be over the road. I got to be home. So that's when I got back into farming. And so
Okay, so you didn't have a crop planted in that time frame. Because I was like, boy, you just do it in the winter.
I helped Dad out a little bit when I was home or whatever. Living right along I-80 was a benefit for trucking, because everything kind of moved between Des
Yep.
Moines and I used to go out in New York City quite a bit and take cereal out there from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and go west too, basically. But being along I-80, you were home usually on the weekends or whatever.
Yep.
May not be for long. You know, might be 2 days. It might be 4 hours.
Right.
You know, depending on what was going on and what your logs were and stuff like that. So.
Yep.
But it was a lot. You know, speed limits were 55 back then, so you didn't burn a lot of rubber on the road, I should say.
Oh, the state of Illinois was. Boy, I kind of laugh. Years ago, if you were going to drive a semi through Illinois, you went through Chicago because it was the least amount of Illinois that you could do. But then after they lifted that speed limit, everybody's like, I'll take 39 any day to get around Chicago.
Yeah, 80 now. You go 80, 90 in Chicago. That's all under construction now or whatever. But anymore, you can go 80 mile an hour. I shouldn't say this because the cops will be after me or whatever. You can drive 80 mile an hour on the Interstate 80 and you won't get, they won't even look at you hardly, you know.
Yeah.
So my neighbor's a cop, so I probably shouldn't say anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a different world out there. And even driving semi, you know, you used to flash your lights when somebody passed you and got back over or whatever, or you got on the CB and said, yep, you missed me or whatever. And those days are gone.
Yeah.
It's just, and
so had you gotten your chauffeur's license?
Probably 1980 or so, 79 or 80, somewhere around there after I got married. So, and I don't know, I just always loved trucks too. I suppose being up there on Highway 92, that was 480 got built. Yep. And whatever, and there's a lot of cattle that went to, it was called IBP at that time frame, and now it's, you know, different. And a lot of cattle went through that way and freight and stuff. Yep. So I always seen that all the time. And of course I had to be out there on the highway too, taking corn out of the field and stuff and going through the gears like crazy on the H here.
Yeah.
First up to the fourth high and whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Oh, I always liked trucks. I had to do some trucking. You know, I just had to. Yep.
It was good. It was good. It was a good experience, and I got to see the country and whatever. A lot of cities and whatever. I've seen the accidents on the road too and whatever. It's just, but fortunately, it was an experience in my life, and it's still being able to. If I want to do any driving, I can still do a little driving or whatever. Yep. So I kept my medical card up and that. And,
yeah. No, that I never understood why more young farmers didn't do some trucking because, you know, that was a good way for me to buy ground. Yep. Was buy a truck because it's cash flow. Yep. It's a lot of cash flow, and if you can wrench on your truck and you can run an older truck, you can make some money.
The wrenching part's the only bad part. You get so damn dirty and whatever.
I know. But
the clutches and, you know, greasing them and stuff, you always come out looking, you know, you're just filthy.
But that, to me, it was cash flow to buy some ground. Yep. Or buy more in my case after I had, like, to get started. And then after I had sold my dairy cows, after I had, you know, been full-time dairy farming, it was a good way to buy a little bit more ground, and it was flexible because when it was time to plant and harvest, I shut the truck off. But all winter long, I mean, I remember the year before I met my wife, the winter before I met my wife, I can remember I was gone 1.2 weeks. I just, you know, went from here to there to, you know, and you weren't missing anything at home in the winter.
No. Just. And of course, the weather was a lot different back then too. You know, we had more snow and icy roads, and here in the Midwest, I should say, anyway. But yeah, it was good. That's what, like you said, you saved money when you were trucking or whatever. Or I did anyway, and that probably helped me to buy farm equipment later on in life and whatever. And
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Paul.
Well, thank you, Ryan.
We'll try and get down maybe even yet this summer or something we'll talk engineering because that's just too much to tack on to.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories I can tell about that and how much it takes to actually, the cost of developing machines and whatever, and even working close to John Deere and IH and just seeing how those two companies work together. So.
Well, and even I'm assuming engineers from both companies all knew each other to a certain.
A lot of IH engineers went over to Deere, like me. So.
Yeah. So yeah, we thought that would be that'd be a really good story just on just that one. So.
Yep. Stay tuned for part 2.
Yeah. All right, Paul. When we got here, this 3020 really stood out to me. And you asked me, first thing you asked me, you said, "You ever hear of this John Deere dealership that was on there?" And I looked.
I don't know if you can see it. You need me to turn
there
the
we
lights
go.
on?
Nope, we're good. So Mosher Implement, Baldwin, Wisconsin, and I said, yeah, that's about, I don't know if it's 17 miles, maybe 19 miles from the farm. That was the closest John Deere dealer to my farm. Where I grew up at my mom and dad's.
Yep.
Durand Implement would have been closer, but that Mosher Implement was right there in Baldwin, Wisconsin, and it was kind of there's an intersection it was on, and that after he quit, it got bought by a New Holland dealer. And then after the New Holland dealer, they built a big they got bought by an Illinois store, Johnson Tractor.
Okay.
And they ended up building a new big store, and now that's an IBA dairy supply place. So, but that's kind of interesting because Mosher was big, but this tractor is pretty unique because it's a
71 model.
Yeah, it's a late.
And I always liked the later style Deeres because of my 240/20s I had. The one was a 72, and of course the other one was a 69 that I had.
Both side console.
And,
yep,
both side consoles. And I've always liked, that's why I found this one. It was clear up in Wisconsin, by your area anyway, Turtle Lake area, the dealer. And which is a little ways to go for it, but took semi up there and we picked her up and brought her back, and the price was right and whatever, and my wife can run it, and she likes to run the Deeres and that, so so it worked out well. So it's just doesn't get used a lot, but it's just a good old, still worth the X amount of money that you pay for it. That's the one thing I like about John Deere's.
Yeah, and this
resale.
And that's original paint on the tractor, with the exception of like the wheels.
Exactly.
But it's a gas side console late one. It's 70, and that shift lever dang near makes it a 72, and it's got the dimmer switch and the single headlights.
Yep, so 71 and 2s had the extended synchro shift lever, and then of course it's got the independent valve for, it's an old 48 loader, which is a good little loader, good bucket on it and everything. And
you think it was it looks like a factory roll guard.
It is, yeah, factory. It's got all the factory stickers on the fenders.
Really?
Warnings and safety and that. So
you never had a kid riding along. A lot of them dairy farms in Wisconsin, that's what happened.
My wife's rode here a couple times or whatever, but she always has to duck her head. So
yeah,
that's the only bad part about having a roll guard.
And it's got dual flashers, which is pretty neat. That's a really neat old 3020.
They both work. All the lights work and stuff. And
it's how many hours?
5,600 hours, or 5,800 hours original. So.
That's a neat tractor. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy that here we are down by, just northwestern Illinois, and the tractor came from where I'm where I'm from.
Yeah, it's ironic. It just proves that stuff gets moved around the whole United States anymore, seems like. So. Yeah,
and you found this, you were working for Deere when you found it, right?
I was, I was at corporate one day, and during lunch hour I was out checking the website and looking for, because I was wanting a later model one, and I happened to come across this and called the dealer and said, well, I'll be up, I don't know, it was like 6-hour drive or whatever to get up there, and I said, I'll be up this day or whatever, or not that day, but I mean, scheduled a time, and me and the wife went on a road trip. So
you didn't bring the semi with you to go?
No.
Okay.
No, and because I wanted to see what it was, because I didn't know if I wanted the gas or not, and I can actually switch it over to diesel if I want, because I found a diesel motor if I wanted to put in it. But
Do you remember that program in the 90s where Deere was selling the 60, it was a 6300 engine, wasn't it? They were putting in them?
it was either for the 3020s, it was a 239 or a 4045. You could buy a kit. And I've got a picture of it or whatever, that kit anyway. But
Yeah,
they don't make it anymore. That's the worst part.
Friends of mine had a 2510 gas, and he loved the tractor, but you know, the 2510 gas ain't exactly. So they did that. They bought, and it was the non-turbo one. So like I think a 6300 would have had the non-turbo engine or whatever.
Yeah, I think
the turbo was a 6400, I think, right?
Yeah, and then there's a lot of air compressor units that used to use the Deere engine, or wherever, where it had the cast iron block or oil pan and stuff like that. That you could, otherwise you would have to beef up the engine to the side rails and stuff like that to handle, or they wouldn't handle the diesel.
Yeah, Deere actually, I remember in like they actually advertised that kit to repower these old tractors.
Yep.
And
because the Dubuque engine always had some issues with them or whatever, and mainly the only was when the balancers got wore or whatever, and then it would break the crankshaft and that.
Yeah.
So, and you can't hardly find parts for them anymore.
Yeah, the Dubuque Deere stuff. And you worked for both companies, and I've talked to, well, you worked with one of the McCormicks, but I've always kind of said, for the life of me, I can't understand that if you get on a Waterloo-built tractor, everything was always, like they really paid attention to where lever placement, to comfort, to ergonomics of a tractor. And it seems like the Dubuque stuff, they went out of their way to just throw things kind of wherever it was. And then you go to International Harvester, and if you look at a 1086 and you're like, why are the levers here, here, and here? But if you look at like a 574 or a 684 with a cab or something like that, you can get right in. The doors open the right way. You can walk right into that cab. And I thought, so the utility stuff on the IH was laid out better, and it was the opposite on the Deere.
Deere had the two sticks in the middle, you know, and which was fine, but you just had to step around them and stuff like that. And I agree.
So well, thanks a lot, Paul. We're gonna come back and do an engineering video.
Not so anytime.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.